wanted to just throw out a couple of buys and sells here, Wiz, just for our Dynasty vets. We want to keep the Dynasty content flowing a little bit. Not that the rookies and the prospects aren't Dynasty content, because rookie drafts are important, but we don't want to forget about all of these veterans that contributed for us last year and in years past. So the way I was thinking about it, Wiz, is that you and I would just bring a buy or a sell. We would be allowed to wax on them. The other gives a couple thoughts, and then that's that. Just to keep kind of the action going for our listeners, right? So we gave you a bunch of stuff on your rookie drafts. Maybe you're trying to go out and get some more picks to attack some of these guys that are going to be drafted. Wiz and I can tell you some players that you might buy and you might sell. So Wiz, do you want to fire off with one of your buys or sells? And we're only bringing one, but I think we talked about a little honorable mention. This is why I'm using the plural forms.
Yeah. No, my honorable mention is a guy that we kind of talked about earlier on the pod, right? So I think Pop Douglas is interesting. I think he's still, I think he's still very cheap in most dynasty circles right now. I tried to grab him in one of the undroppables leagues here and got swiftly denied because the secret's out in some spots. But I think there's a lot of spots right now where he's still awfully cheap. And look, if somebody like Drake May does come in here, I think you're going to see like Pop become like quite a big part of the offense. And I just think at his current price point, just could be a sneaky value, right? So that's kind of an honorable mention to keep on there as a buy. But the other one that I had, Trav, was Jaden Reed, right? So like Jaden Reed is the guy that like, look, dude, I love the player. I do. I like the player a lot. Like he had a great rookie season, but like if we're looking at like what he produced his rookie season, top 24 wide receiver that rookie season, but that 10 touchdowns, less than 100 targets. Yes, he had a nice yards per route run, just about 2.23, just about 50 receiving yards a game. The problem is, man, that Green Bay has too many talented fucking dudes, and that's the problem, right? Like there's too many mouths to feed in Green Bay right now. And LaFleur is just like, LaFleur is not Kellen Moore, where it's going to be feed the wide receiver one. Like that's why like AJ Brown's going to go nuts in 24, right? But LaFleur is not that guy. And then, they go out, they sign Josh Jacobs. Like there's a hype train that will not stop gaining steam for Dontavian Wicks. And, they've got the 2 tight ends there as well. So like there's only so many targets to go around. Now, if like somebody like Dobbs, like if he beats him out in camp, like that's a totally different story, right? But yeah, I worry about Jaden Reed being able to kind of replicate that production, especially when you think about like he was pretty touchdown dependent during his rookie season, right? Like 10 touchdowns as a rookie on 92 targets is quite a bit.
Totally. And I think he, like, without looking, I think he had a stretch where he had like 4 in like a 6-game span or something like that. I think there was like some nice saturation within that brought him into our hearts, right? And if anyone was not watching on screen, as you were saying that, Wiz, I motioned as if I was putting a dagger in my heart because it hurts. And the reason why it hurts so, Wiz, is because you got a case to be made. And I'm not necessarily as worried about Wicks because I think he kind of just falls off and maybe falls by the wayside. But maybe I'm just not as in tune with all of the things that he brings to the table. I'm a little bit more worried about those tight ends, right? Tucker Kraft coming on, like Luke Musgrave was pulling on our heartstrings in the first half of last season. Like he was doing some really good work as one of those kind of back end top 12 tight ends who's under the radar, so could still be cheap. Tucker Kraft came right in after Musgrave got hurt and did the exact same thing. Then you see him chugging a beer at a fan signing thing recently on social media. So I love
stock immediately up.
I love this
stock immediately up.
And then you look at having potentially more 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, and those guys just eating the middle of the field, which is where we want Jaden Reed to operate. Like he might not even be on the field in those 12 personnel sets because he's the smaller guy between Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, and Romeo Dobbs. Jaden Reed, to me, doesn't project to be a guy they're going to kick outside when they only have 2 wide receivers on the field. So I don't like what you're saying, but I understand and I agree with what you're saying, Wiz.
I mean, I hate it, dude. Like I own Jaden Reed in a couple spots. I've moved off him in a couple spots this offseason strictly because of that and just trying to reduce some exposure. I do still have a couple shares of him, but like it's just something I'm thinking about because like, look, Jordan Love's great. And I think we loved what we saw out of Green Bay, but it's definitely cause for concern.
Yeah, for sure, man. No, I hear you there. So I kind of have 2 guys. I can't decide like off on the spot here, which guy's going to be my honorable
Yeah.
mention, because I didn't have a ton of notes. I just wanted to talk about him. I am ready to duck from the tomatoes that might be thrown because people love
Yeah.
these players. The first guy that I have is Isaiah Pacheco. I'll just be kind of quick on him. Like, great season last year, looked like the bell cow in Kansas City.
Yep.
I'm not sure he's going to be afforded that opportunity again this year, because while Andy Reid sometimes wants to use a bell cow, he often doesn't have that guy. And so he brings in multiple bodies to do that. We did see it last year, so that is encouraging. But when I looked on Keep Trade Cut, I'm seeing that Isaiah Pacheco is valued at the Dynasty running back 14 right now. And I think that is absolute ceiling for where he was ever going to be. And I don't, I think that's like unicorn type shit that he even got to that level, being, I think, a 5th round pick. So I just think if you can capitalize on that running back 14 value for somebody in your league who sees that he's on the Chiefs offense, thinks that he's going to have that staying power. We haven't seen guys have staying power in this offense, even when they've had spurts of production, right? So I'm not so confident that he's going to be sticking around for too long. And when I see that he's borderline top 12 prices, if you can get a 1st round pick or even like a 2nd round pick plus for Isaiah Pacheco, I am doing that all day. I just think that there's already not a lot of pass catching for the running back in Kansas City. A little bit of a boost up last year, I believe, but nothing that you're going to be writing home to mom about necessarily. He needs heavy red zone volume and he needs to make a bunch of big plays. And I don't know if that's going to be sustainable long-term over another full season, because we already saw that they brought in J.K. Dobbins for a visit, I think just today. I love the Dobb Goblin. They re-signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which I don't think is, going to be putting a huge dent in Isaiah Pacheco, but I think they're not done adding to that position. I wouldn't be surprised if they went in the draft, in which case I would be a lot more worried for Pacheco. So I'd be getting out before that.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I think the way I look at it is it's a good point, because I think you are at kind of that ceiling at running back 14, right? I think the only way I'm holding on to a guy like him is if I'm competing this year. If I'm not competing, like, I'm absolutely moving off him, like 100% with you, because, one of the things that we were talking about before this, Trav, was like the class next year is going to push so many of these guys that are in this flat tier, like basically, like, once you get past, like, I guess A-Chain at like what, 6, like right around there, from like 7 to like 11 or 12 is like one big flat tier. And that tier is pretty much, in my opinion, like mostly going to get pushed down right off the jump next year when you have these rookies come in, right? So, like, look, if you're competing, I get holding on to him, but as Trav said, if you can kind of move off of him for, a 2nd plus, or, say somebody's desperate to compete this year and they'll give you a late 1st or whatever, like, I'm definitely moving off him for that, because to your point, I just can't see him getting higher than running back 14.
Yeah. Bingo. The other guy, and this is the guy who I'm going to have to duck the tomatoes for, and that would be Derrick Henry. And just want to be clear that this is not an indictment on what I think he can do in Baltimore over the next couple of years, because I think he's going to absolutely smash. And if you keep him, he's going to be great for your team. The reason I think he could be sold is because I think you could go in there and you could get a 1st round pick in this year's draft for him to a team who thinks that they can win right now. And I think you should do that, because we saw in Tennessee, he started to tail off a little bit. I'm talking to probably the biggest Tyjae Spears lover of all time on screen with me right now, who has dug into a lot of this stuff. And there were signs that Derrick Henry was starting to tail off a little bit. And now that he's gone to Baltimore, his value has boosted back up to like 2018 Derrick Henry levels, because we know what that offense can provide to a running back. And so I think while I would love to have that production on my team, we're always looking to improve our roster for the long term in Dynasty. So I would actually just capitalize on that resurgence in his value, because he's a player who I think we haven't seen it yet fully, but he's a player who I think if the cliff comes for him, it's going to be a very steep one. Like, if he loses some of that footwork, if he loses some of that quickness to be able to get through and then start mucking guys over in the open field, I think that is a death sentence for him as a guy who's going to be a bell cow in the NFL, because we know he does not project to pass catches. So that's just kind of my take on Derrick Henry. And it sucks because I love the running back in Baltimore too. So it's really hard, but I just think that he's running back 17 on Keep Trade Cut. And I think you could probably get like top 12 prices for him right now.
I mean, look, man, if you approach somebody right now and they'll give you a late first because this running back draft is like, really not one of the best running back drafts that we've seen, and they think they can get a much more impact guy for, a 1 or 2 years kind of stretch run here with Derrick Henry in Baltimore, then absolutely go out and make that move, right? I definitely think his value has gotten a shot in the arm since he kind of signed with Baltimore. So yeah, absolutely. Like if you're not competing and you're not moving off Derrick Henry right now, like I think you're probably doing your dynasty team a disservice in the long run, because it's really giving you an opportunity to kind of get out one last time, to your point, like before that cliff comes for him.
For sure, for sure. And in Tennessee, we thought he might have to be a guy who died on our roster. So he does
Yeah.
not have to be that for you anymore.